Hi there, and thanks for tuning in to Pro Tools tutorial number 3 here at SoundOptic.com. My name is Anthony Zeller, and today I wanted to continue on speaking more specifically about track type and inserts and sends, and internal busing that relates to the inserts and sends, and some basics on dynamics and effects processors that are built into Pro Tools. So if you were with me last time, we started working with a Pro Tools session that I just had named Avatar because I was using a consumer DVD on my analog inputs here just as a source to have something to experiment with. I wanted to continue on and do a little record a little bit of that for use for our examples here. So in order to record, I need to create an audio track, in this case a stereo audio track. Hit Shift Apple N and the dialog window will open here for a new track. You can click on stereo here, or if you hold down the Apple keys for forward and back, it'll go through the different selections just for fun. I'm going to make an audio track, obviously, because I want to record some audio. And again, if you name the track before you start recording, the audio files will have that name attached to them as well. Any additional recordings done on the same track or over the same audio file will have a subsequent new number, 01, 02, 03, and so on afterwards. I'm just going to call this one Avatar Comp, because it's a comp, not a raw dialogue stem or anything. Not that it's terribly important, but just to go back to previous tutorial, if you look at the session setup window, Apple 2 on the numeric keypad, you can make sure that you are clocking from the clock source that you wish, and that your timecode rate for the session is set at what you desire. Like I said, we're not locking anything here, but I'm just going to leave it at 2398 and continue on. So in order to record audio to the track, I'm just going to make it a little larger here. You click on the Record Enable button, and F12 on the keyboard will put you into record. Actually, one thing I wanted to do, just for sake of having some room here, in the post world and probably in the music world 90% of the time, it's good to start the session not right at 0, because then you don't give yourself any room ahead of the timeline here in order to alter the tracks without having to scoot everything one direction or the other. So I actually want to start recording at 1 hour, so I'm going to hit the star on the numeric keypad here, and I'm going to type in 1 hour into my timeline, or into my timecode window, and you'll see now that it's flashing at 1 hour. And also I want to make sure that I can monitor this track, so it defaulted to my first analog input, which is a DVD in. That's good. And it defaulted to stereo, which is a sub output of my 5.1. I don't want that. I want 7 and 8 here, which is what I'm using to monitor for this tutorial through my console. So now if we press F12 and press play on the DVD player, you'll see it recording.
So you just figured you'd come out here.
And after you're done recording, if you want to get rid of the 01 here after the file, you can always double click on it and erase it. I usually do this if I'm doing a laydown, if I'm not going to punch in and do multiple recordings on the same track, just so that the disk file will not have the 01 amended after it. And there you have it. Okay, so this is an audio track, obviously. If we hit play, we'll hear it playing back exactly as I recorded it. If we highlight an area here and go up to the play button and press play, obviously, but you can right click on it on a Mac if you have a 2-button mouse and hit loop, or if you don't have a 2-button mouse, you can hold down Shift, Apple, and L, and it'll toggle between playback and loop playback. I'm just doing this for ease, just for example here. You'll see if you highlight an area
Got this.
and you're in loop playback,
Got this.
it will, as you might expect, keep looping. So whatever area highlight will be the duration. Now I'm going to flip to the mix page, Apple equals, and first of all, there's 2 different parts to the track here in terms of ways you can feed signal in and out of it for effects. There's inserts, which generally is reserved for dynamics processors or things that you want to have only affect this track. If you want to basically feed it through, feed it through an effect, and have the entire signal affected by whatever plugin you put it on, you would use an insert. Most practical use for that, of course, is dynamics, like a compressor or expander. I could show you an example here. If I put on the Focusrite D3 compressor, press play. I want to be able to compress the dialogue here. In this case, it's everything, but compress the dialogue.
You just figured you'd come out
Change the threshold. Now I'm really obviously pounding it.
with no training of any.
You can hear it pumping, obviously. This isn't a desirable thing to do, but just for example.
So you just figured you'd come out
Bypass the plugin by hitting the bypass. You can switch between what you're affecting and the original
here. No
signal.
training of any.
So anyway, that's an insert. Very basics of an insert. I'm going to remove that just because I don't really want it on there. The other portion here, if you hold down the Apple key, you can go to assignments. It'll show you 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5 here, and then it's got 5 more assignments, F through J. If you click on Ascend, in this case, I don't have any buses created, no internal buses. It's trying to send it out an interface, which I don't want to do. So I will go into my I/O setup, and here I am on my buses. I'm going to create a new path. You may already have paths here, but I erased them just prior to this tutorial. I'm going to create a new path, and I'm going to make it a stereo path, and I'm going to call it reverb, just because I'm going to create a reverb track. And you want to tell it what virtual path you want to use. In Pro Tools HD, I believe I have 128 mono sends here. And I'm going to create a stereo one here, and I'm just going to use 1 and 2. That's the most simple. So now I've created a bus, a path through which I can send audio internally in Pro Tools. So then if I go here you'll see that bus is now no longer grayed out, and I can click on reverb, which is my reverb bus, and it shows up with this handy little fader, which I'll get to in just a moment. So obviously, if we're sending signal somewhere, we want to have it return somewhere. Most practical use for a reverb would be on an auxiliary track. I'll make it stereo also. Aux input and create. So an aux track can contain no audio. You'll see you don't even get the ability to switch it to show waveform, because it will not allow you to record audio to an aux track. It is solely there as a place to send signal, either once it's recorded or from an input. Doesn't make any difference, but defaults to showing you the volume in terms of the rubber band line here. So it also defaulted to the stereo output, which I don't want to use. I want to have everything come out 7 and 8 so we can hear it. I'm going to tell the input to be that same bus path, the reverb. So now you can think of it as a direct chain. Any signal that I send out this output will in turn show up through this input and back out of 7 and 8. Now if I just push play and move this fader up, the perception is that it'll just get louder, because all I'm doing is sending the same dry signal to another path and through the same output. So, but I'll probably want to use a reverb on this. In my case, I'm using a TDM system, so I've got some TDM reverbs here under the subheading reverb. I'll just use the simple reverb 1 that came with my system. So now, any signal that I send out of this fader will go through the reverb and to output 7 and 8, dependent on my send level here. So.
Got this.
So you just figured you'd come out here to the most hostile environment known to man with no training.
And this is not destructive. I'm not creating any audio files or anything by doing this. I'm solely just taking a piece of this signal, sending it out at this particular level through the reverb, and returning it to a return path that we can hear. It's probably a good idea if you had multiple tracks, for instance, multiple stereo tracks. I'm going to grab this aux and physically move it over here just so I always keep it to the right. If you had several tracks here that were playing along, and you wanted to send them all to the same reverb, which would be a good idea if you were mimicking the same space or something, if they were all supposed to be in the same space and it was a room reverb, something of that nature. Then you could use the same bus path on multiples here, and you'll see it'll come up with another fader. If you want, you can hit the Apple key here at the sends, and it'll actually show you A, sends A, or you can hold down Apple key and see it sends B. There's nothing on there, but it gives you a smaller representation of the send fader here, and panning and all the sorts of controls that would go with a normal send. At any rate, you could send multiple signals to the same reverb input. It's a lot more practical than trying to put a reverb on an insert, for instance, and then start messing around with the wet-dry setting here for each one of them independently. It's kind of a way to send multiple things to one fader, and it's very practical, especially when you consider, if you look at system usage, I'm only using reverb 1 is only taking up one chip here. If I were to put one across all 5 of these, one on each channel, it would be taking up 5 chips, 5 DSP chips, and pretty soon I'm going to be running out, especially if this is a big mix session. So another good reason to use an aux. And you can rename this aux too for visual reasons, if you wanted to call it, reverb 1 even. That way, if you've got tons of faders across the screen, you can scroll across and say, oh yeah, that's my reverb 1, my room verb, or whatever. Okay, that is the practical use of a auxiliary track. One last thing, actually, there is yet one more path you can use to get in and out of Pro Tools for effects, either dynamic or reverbs, or time-based effects, I should say. If you look under the I/O setup once again, and you go to the insert page, you'll see that I had previously created stereo inputs with mono subpaths here for each of my 16 in total, but my 16 I/O for my two 88220s that I have connected. It's kind of the reason I attached them to the system in the first place, was so that you could, if you had hardware that you had used, analog hardware or digital, doesn't matter, but outside of Pro Tools, non-virtual hardware, hardware reverb, or maybe a nice old tube compressor or something you really like, you can actually use them with Pro Tools here, and it allows you to do so by creating an insert path here. And what you would do is, as you might expect on the insert side, go down here to I/O, and you can actually use insert 1 and 2, and what that's physically, or 3 and 4, 5 and 6, whatever you have it patched into based on your I/O setup. So if, for instance, I had a nice stereo compressor or something hooked up to my insert 1 and 2, I could physically just select I/O 1 and 2, and what that will do is the signal that I'm now playing, you won't hear, and in fact you won't even see the fader for it, because it is at the moment being sent out outputs 1 and 2 of that 882. Since I have nothing plugged into it, there's nothing to come back in the input of that 882 to complete the signal path here. But if you had a stereo compressor in, you don't have to do anything else with the channel. Here you just physically select insert 1 and 2, turn around and dial up your knobs, whatever you like, and continue on. So you can use hardware inserts. And of course, if you had this in your studio setup, and it was a stereo compressor, you could rename it, stereo compressor or something. And you'll see that once I accept that, now that's what it'll call it here on my insert. So it's fully customizable. You can do whatever you like. Anyway, in a nutshell, that is the basics of track types, inserts, sends, the busing that goes along with it, and some basics of time-based effects or dynamic effects, compressors, and so on. So thanks for tuning in, and please stay tuned for more tutorials as we go down the road here, continuing on with our basics and moving on to some more advanced things later. Thanks for watching.